Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who witnesses last saw screaming across the sky to the west.
Tim Longo.
Terra Longo.
Terra Longo, yep. Oh, that's right. What did you name? Did you name Terra? No, you named
I did
Log.
not, no. I named Shadow after you, and I renamed Cyan because I just don't like that name, even though that's what we're going to call him when we talk about him. Yeah. I just think that's a dumb name, personally. Sorry to Cyan stands out there who actually genuinely like the name. I think that name is bad. Anyway.
It is odd, yeah. What did
I
you
called
name
him Cyrano. I called him Cyrano.
Oh, that's
because
right.
he
That's right.
speaks in that kind of weird way.
Yeah, I like him. Like
Glenn. Yeah, no, I like him as a character for sure. I just didn't like the name. He's got the most pathos so far. So you came back to this game after 2 weeks. This gets us right into this game, of course, being Final Fantasy VI, which gets us right into something that we often run into in this podcast, which is our schedules don't permit playing every day most of the time.
Right.
And it can be really hard sometimes to come back to a game, especially this time with 2 weeks in between, and be like, what am I doing? What are the goals right now?
Yeah.
Because older games just don't have the support. Even sometimes modern games don't have the support to help you with that. I've been playing Dragon Quest Builders, and there's sort of in-world support there for like what quests you can go on, because you have a town, you can talk to the people, and they'll just tell you again what you're supposed to be doing. But there's no quest journal. So, you'll be like, what was I doing? And that happened here. In fact, it happened because we were trying to figure out, well, what was the next thing to happen? Like, what did you have to, we had two different groups. Last time we talked about the one thing we had in common. And we didn't talk about the two things that we had different. So this time we came back and you asked me, well, what did that group of three people do? And I'm like, yeah, what did they do?
Yeah, because
just 2 days or 3 days ago.
Yeah, because I had the first group that I had done when the split happened was the one with Terra and the three of them. So I think we figured out it was probably Terra, Edgar, and Bannon.
Yep.
I think. And you're kind of protecting Bannon there too, I believe, or something like that. But anyway, yeah, I could not, even in my notes, I didn't have very many notes about that section for some reason. So, I think, well, I mean, it's an era without quest logs, I guess, and exclamation points over people's heads or mini maps with directionality to them or something. The earlier sessions were worse. This session coming back I didn't remember what had happened in the past, but at least when I came back this time, I had saved right on the Moogle
right. Me too.
screen. Yeah. So, and all I had left to do was locked story. So I knew that I needed to do lock, but the downside was I couldn't remember very much about the other two. And then also I couldn't remember what happened this time is, even though I knew I needed to do lock section, as soon as I started lock section, I was like, why is he here again? What is my goal? Like, what am I even doing with him? Now, it's a fairly, at these moments, it's a fairly linear kind of, game. So you can only do so much anyway, especially in that one, because it's very linear in that you have to, find there's locks and keys that you have to deal with to progress through the town. But as far as like context there's no like log, right. Or previously on that I can refer to like why he's there. And so to be honest, like, I don't even think I could tell you right now why he was there, and I finished it, I guess
I think it was sort of as I recall, it was he was like a behind enemy lines, like I can get in there, get out quick, find out what they're planning, sort of deal. I think was kind of the motivation for it. But you like that section.
No, I did like the section, yeah, and I like the section overall. I think maybe like specific, I guess, macro plot story stuff. I wasn't, again, I just, like I said, I couldn't remember the specifics, but it wasn't, I guess, that complicated. But I like the section because of the switch up of gameplay, and the concept of him being thief-like and stealing disguises, and actually having to make a little bit of a decision about, because you can steal an officer's disguise at one point too, and I feel like I kind of might have done that out of order, and I'm not sure if I needed to do the officer one because eventually I put the merchant one back on. But just even like that moment with the merchant where you meet the merchant in like a pub or something, and he wants to fight you, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, we're fighting a merchant, and I didn't actually figure out that I needed to steal his clothes on the first try, so I was like, okay. And then I go find the little kid who says, well, you can't progress unless you're a merchant. And I was like, oh, can I steal? Wait a second. So that the sort of aha moment of putting together, wait, Locke can steal stuff. Somebody mentions like stealing clothes at some point. I don't remember who it was, or some clue from some NPC. And I was like, wait a second, should I go back and fight? Maybe I can get that merchant's, because that's like obviously the first time you ever can fight a merchant. And they have art for him in battle mode and everything. So it's very cool. And then you steal his clothes, during the battle, and then he runs away, and they have art for that as well, which is like, who does this? Again, like I said this all through Final Fantasy IX. I'm saying it all through this game. I'm like, ironically, I don't think I felt like I didn't say that as much during Chrono Trigger, even though I think Chrono Trigger is a little more up my alley, but just gameplay wise. But anyway, it just was delightful. And again, I asked myself, who does this? It's just such a specific little idea that someone wanted to implement. And it makes Locke feel very different from everybody else, in a good way. So it kind of, again, feels like you're playing different games almost at times.
Right. I think that's one of the real strengths of the battle system. And we'll talk about that. Probably not so much this time, but in the future, I'm sure, especially now that we have espers, which may come into play more later. We'll be coming back to talk about combat more, but I do really love the fact that who you have in your party very much will change the tenor of the actual play in combat, like what you're actually trying to do with each of them. And the sort of what you'll see happen, like, well, these characters do these sorts of things. This character does these sorts of things. I steal all the time with Locke, to the point where, people will be telling me on my stream, like, what are you doing? You're taking way more damage there. You're getting in value from stealing. And I'm like, yeah, but I like to steal. Right. So, although at a certain point you get, what they call capture in this one, that they renamed to mug later, which is a better translation. Because instead of, you're not just trying to steal, you're trying to beat somebody up and take their stuff.
As a new ability, you mean? As
a new ability for Locke.
Interesting. How do you activate that, a new ability for him then? It just is another thing on the list?
His steal is replaced. I think it's a piece of equipment. I don't know if I bought it or if I found it.
I did get a thing where he throws a weapon. Yeah, I mean, my only criticism of Locke really is during combat, because I feel like the stealing's fine for me, and it's interesting, but as far as like doing damage and kind of min-maxing, I generally don't take him because I feel like he's limited as far as his combat abilities goes.
Interesting.
Okay. So, and the stealing isn't as important to me.
Yeah, I always loved doing that. I mean, in Final Fantasy IX, I did it all the time with Zidane as well. And often the thief is kind of the I don't know, the Loki style character, right? The trickster is kind of the playful main character often in these games. And I think that, so I like to lean into that. The other thing I was going to say about the Locke section, the South Figaro section, is I feel like it was a little, for me, undercut because I had already explored all the spaces to some degree. There are a couple things that are new, like things you can do that are new. that opens it up even a little more. But there were things that I felt like would have been sort of surprising about navigating the town if you hadn't done it your first time through South Figaro. I don't know if that happened to you, but like hidden stairways and things like that. I think we actually mentioned them last time we talked about it. So I don't think those were surprises, but I feel like they are built to be surprises in a certain way. Like you're sort of like, they're hoping you won't go find them the first time through. But we did. So I don't know. It felt undercutty.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I think that's true. Let's see. So obviously, you may not find it in the first time through, and they don't actually have as much telegraphing going on as they do in lock section, because when you go to where the secret bookcase is, which you may remember, they turn the music off and they turn on this wind effect.
Right.
And as you get closer to where it is, and some NPCs give you some voice lines about it, they increase the volume of the wind effect, like per tile. So like, you can hear it step up, the volume step up. So it's cumbersome, but effective. And I would bet pretty cool for the time, on the SNES. And so it is I definitely would have liked to have discovered that in that section. The one counterpoint that I will give though is, I generally, which I think I've talked about on the podcast before, I generally like returning to areas with a different context. Yeah. And because I did know the section, I did know the town. When I had been there before, there were places you can't get to, or at least one place you couldn't get to. And there's a couple, like the dungeon area where you're like, what is this down here for? And then when you go back there as Locke and there's actually purpose there, you already have, I explored that town so much the first time that it was kind of neat that I did know it, and then I felt like I'd been there before, but then like it's occupied by the enemy. And so that changes things up a bunch. And so I kind of actually, even though it was a bummer to have the reveal, to lose the reveals on those spots, I did kind of appreciating coming back to a place that I had previously, thought that I had mastered.
Right. Yeah, so no, that's fair. Yeah, no, it does. There is that kind of delight in it still, for sure. Like just to, like you said, recontextualize the space of just like, oh, this was, even from us as developers looking at it saying, oh, this is why the clockwork, why these things are here. Right. Like, oh, this is here, and sometimes I recognize that, like, oh, I'm going to need this later. I'm sure there were times when I first passed through South Figaro, like, yeah, this doesn't make a lot of sense that I would care about this right now. I'm running around all these spaces. I found some elixirs or whatever, but it's a lot of work to find those things. And the big one, I guess, was the cider you have to deal with this time.
Yeah, the
right?
ciders,
which I was frustrated by. And like, well, why can't I do? Like, it's clear I have to be able to do this, and it's because you're going to have to come back. So
it is odd. Yeah, they shouldn't have. Yeah. They really kind of shouldn't have given him that voice line the first time you meet him, because you can't resolve it there.
Right. So, yeah, they should have had him lying in bed or something, and like, oh, when he gets up, he'll want his cider or something like that. I'm sure there would have been a way to make that pay off a little bit better. But
on the flip side, though, the I knew there was going to be something that have to do with the clock in the basement.
Yeah,
because they were kind of trying to telegraph to you that, or signal to you that that the clock needed something, and then you eventually do get the key that allows you to escape, and you go through the secret door with the clock. And so that was kind of cool, because it felt like a resolution to a theory that you have that you finally get the key for. So so and then I also liked the intrigue behind Celis, or however you say her name, and sort of that whole sort of storyline is interesting to me too. So
yeah, she's an interesting character to me in general. So no pun intended. So we will probably revisit with her, I think, in the future as well. I had not done the 3-person parts. So that was the one thing I had left. That I felt was fairly straightforward and probably the weakest of the 3. You just really have to get back to Narsha, and the one trick there is to find the entrance to the secret entrance back into the mine, so you can kind of circle around back behind. Although for me, it was kind of nice because it transitioned pretty directly into the Terra scene, right?
Yeah, right.
Or into the defend the city scene, and then the Terra scene, I should say more accurately. So it kind of actually flowed a little bit more naturally, because it just was like, well, that's where I already am, and now the story's just going to continue from there. What was that transition like for Locke? Did he just then show up in Narsha? I don't remember that part.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I don't remember the exact scene, but I think they just fade, and then like everyone's there in the resistance base, talking.
Right.
Yeah. And then they head to the Esper, I guess. Yeah. Right.
And then they're going to go up onto that. Yeah. They're making their way to that same promontory, which is where they have hid the Esper. But then the Empire's coming, it's like, oh my goodness. And you have to split the party up, into multiple groupings, to defend that mountains, several mountain passes, very similarly to an earlier section with Locke. I guess it was just Locke and Terra at that point, where you had to do something similar. Maybe it was entirely Locke. I can't remember now. If it was, she was unconscious. So Locke was like having to defend, against individual soldiers in the first section we played. Now we have 3 groups of 3, 3, and 2, I guess. Like, 2, I guess you could do 4, 3, and 1, or 4, 2, and 2. I didn't think about doing that, but I think you could.
Maybe.
And did you fail at that at all?
No, I didn't. No, you mentioned you did, and
you're just better at this game.
Well, I think I'm lucky. Have you been chocoboing around at all? I'm curious.
I have not. No.
Okay,
because I know I'm going to have to grind anyway, so I just don't. Yeah, I just don't bother trying to avoid the combat because I know I'm going to need that XP. No, I was leveled up. I think my division of characters was not particularly inspired. I don't remember what I did, but I think looking back, after I did it once, I was like, oh yeah, that wasn't great. And then I also just didn't manage health well, so I just was not popping into menus and making sure I healed right away. So I would go into battle and then be like, oh shoot, I'm nearly dead, and then characters would get knocked down, and then they do respawn those parties up at the top, but I don't know, it was just a little hairy.
Yeah.
It just kind of it just kind of slipped through my fingers, and you just do it again basically. I mean, I think you just
how did you fail though? Was it that they got through, or
they got to Bannon? Yeah, they got to Bannon. Okay. So the 2 groups that I had kind of closest to him were not really my strongest group. I ended up basically flanking and coming from behind to get groups with my strongest group, which I think was just Cyan and Locke, maybe, or Cyan and Sabin, I think I had together. And so they were picking them off from behind as well. Like whenever they had the opportunity, I would switch to them and run around kind of behind and pick out whatever outliers there were. They were just basically the strongest for me, even though it was just 2 of them, as long as I kept them healed. I mean, that was the issue. I burned through a lot of potions there. My second time. So, but dying was not a big deal. It just restarted right before. It basically had a checkpoint save and started the whole thing over again. Like, hey, split up your party, etc. Just re-explain the mechanics and let you go. And then we get to fight Kefka for the first time as well.
Yeah, and I think I happened into, I don't remember exactly who was in what party, but I actually have been really heavily leaning toward the magic users, which is actually against what I usually do. So, especially because both of them can heal as well. What I ended up, before the Kefka battle, what I think I accidentally happened into is I progressed 2 groups very quickly down the pathways and found the 2 bottlenecks, which basically all of them are going to go into. So a 3rd group I actually didn't use at all.
Wow. Okay.
They just kept hitting those 2 bottlenecks, and and I just kind of pounded through them. So But yeah, the Kefka, why is it not? I remember his artwork, but I don't feel like it was memorable to me. He just had a lot of different abilities that a lot of different spells he was throwing at you.
Yeah, the battle didn't read to me as particularly interesting either, to be honest. And I don't remember. I actually think he defeated one group, and maybe I sent another group in. I can't remember now. Which you can do. It's just long. As long as people.
Oh yeah, I figured that was. I think I got close to losing to him, and was wondering if that was going to be an option, but because I didn't want to start over. But I did finish him with my main group, which is basically Terra, Celis, and maybe Edgar.
God, you like that damage.
Or Sabin. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I think I'm going to stick with Edgar. Yeah.
Interesting.
Much to my chagrin, and he's grown on me, and I'll talk about that later. But
okay, cool. Well, that might change something we talked about before. I might think we have 4 overlapping characters. We might have the same party. Although no, maybe not. I think maybe not. Actually, I think I'm still right, just not for the right reason. I think we are going to have 3 in common and 1 different. Anyway, so then the big thing happens with Terra. Here's what my notes say: Terra and the Esper, all caps Esper ... because of course JRPG you need 4 dots, and I just put what.
Yeah, I mean I forget where it comes up at, like is that where they talk about? That's not is that the exposition where they talk? Yeah, the War of the Magi. There's a big exposition dump.
Yeah.
Right before that, I guess that's even before the Gauntlet, actually. And then she transforms. So I mean, you're the Final Fantasy guy. Espers are they like summons?
They're like summons.
Final Fantasy 9.
Yeah,
like
sort
the big
of
thing. The big
yeah,
deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been called Titans, I think, in some of them, and
they changed their names even. God,
yeah, they're not. Although I think the names of the actual ones are often the same. Like Rama, there's always a Rama, or what other ones? Atomos. There's often an Atomos was one of the big ones, I think, in Final Fantasy 9. That's the one that basically devours that city. There's a bunch of them that the names are always there, and they're all listed actually in the manual. I went and looked at the manual on that. They have all the spells. They have everything's just listed in what they do.
I don't know if the manual that comes with it's like maybe a 30 or 40 page manual, but the one that comes with the digital download on PS3, I wonder if it's not the full manual, because I don't know if I have.
You should just go to the Nintendo site and get it, because they have all of them up there because of the classic. Yeah. So any game that's on the classic has a manual just downloadable from Nintendo's site. So you can just go to the classic collection. That's what I used. And it was pretty long. I can believe it being shorter in the PS2 anthology.
Yeah.
Because they would have been putting multiple ones together. And then when they singly reissued them, they probably were like, well, we'll just take the part we'll just take what was in there in the anthology, which probably wasn't the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think there's some there was some cutting, and nobody went back and did the work to say, was like this originally the whole manual? Because why would they do that?
Right.
They'd have to know. So.
Yeah. I mean, when I look in the menus at someone's I guess I'm still a little worried about how long the game is and how far we've gotten, because when I look at the space, the menu space they give, because, for spells or in some cases abilities or espers or whatever, you can keep scrolling down and down and down into empty space. And I'm like, is this going to fill up at some point? Like, that's a lot of stuff.
I mean, no. I'm not. No. Basically, the way I think it works is the way they architect it is every spell has a dedicated position in that list, more or less.
Oh, but not every person has every spell.
not every person's. Well, I think it's possible because of how the Esper system works, which I guess we should probably talk about when we get to there, and maybe not this week even.
Yeah, maybe not this week because we just scratched the surface.
We just started with that, but basically you can switch the Espers around.
Yeah, so you can give them to different people.
Right. So you could just grind and everybody could get everything.
You can get more than one of the same Esper?
No. The joining is not permanent. So you assign an Esper to somebody. Okay, now they get all those abilities. Now assign them a different Esper. So now they get all the abilities from the next.
Oh,
Esper.
they keep once they
learn them, they keep the abilities. Yeah, they're not associated with the Esper. There's the person basically, I don't know, is bestowed them. So that's why those lists
I thought
are so
it was
long.
like an item. I thought an Esper, once you use it, and then you...
No. As you're learning them, they're basically skills that the character learns. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Yeah. But that's why those lists are so long.
So you're going to want everyone to, well, your main ones, I guess, to
use every Esper and grind a ton. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's the D&D term? Attune to each of the Espers, so they can. Okay, I see. Because, like, for instance, like in Celis's, list, right? Like, as soon as you go below Cure, there's empty spaces, right? And so that's where Esper stuff. I guess those are probably Cure 2, Cure 3, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, all those things are going to get show up later. Yeah, and the lists of spells. I mean, those are also in the full manual, and there's a lot of them, and basically every one of them has a dedicated slot in that list.
I see. Yeah, okay,
which makes a certain amount of sense. You could see it going either way. Like, what does this character have versus what does this character have? But I think it actually makes more sense because of the way the Esper system works to just say, look, slot 0 is always Cure or whatever it is, right? It's always the same. So it's easy to find them. Regardless of how you decide to train up individual characters.
It'll just make up for a lot of, I mean, obviously this is an early SNES game, so it's like, this is a SNES game, so they're only going to be limited, they can only do so much, but late game, I can imagine a lot of scrolling. That's why I'm kind of, it's like,
yep. That's why I'm happy to be in the wait mode.
Yeah, for sure. No,
once you get in there, you're just like, okay, all right, take my time. Page around, find the thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I believe, and that's a pretty common thing. I think a lot of the PS1 games work that way as well. That it's particular slots for particular spells, and they always appear in the same order. So that's just kind of something you see in a lot of JRPGs, and I think it's partly influenced by how they want to associate memory. They don't want to store a list of what each person has. They want to store a list of flags, turn a thing on or off, right? And that's a lot easier. It's like, there's 8 per screen. There you go. That's 8 flags. That fits really nice into 8 bits, And so it's just super easy to do it that way. And to actually maintain a list of all the things you have, and what order they're in is a lot trickier, and uses more memory. So yeah, especially on memory constrained systems, this is a sensible way to do it. Anyway, that's a little peek behind the scenes of memory analysis from your programmer pal, Brett.
Lovely.
So Tara transforms into whatever she transforms into. I
mean, it seems like they're alluding to, well, I guess we kind of get there by the end of this session, but it seems like she might be an Esper.
Yeah, or something. Or I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. She definitely. I mean, she literally visually transforms as well, and then starts flying through the Mode 7 world of life, and which was, I thought, very effective. I mean, I feel like we talked about in the pre-show, but Mode 7, as far as like the Mode 7 games, the games we've played with Mode 7 so far, we haven't played like Star Fox or Mario Kart yet, but if we ever do, but we did.
We played Mario Kart together.
Right. That small session, but that's right. But I mean, used pretty effectively, I feel like, in this game. Like they found a good way to, both in cinematics, for lack of a better term, as well as the open world, it works well. But she's flying. She then goes into this kind of cinematic where she's flying around, right? Like she flies
screaming across the sky, across the sky. Yeah, she just goes flying around. It's pretty neat. It's echoed again at the end of this session with the airship that does the same thing. All of that is still pretty linear at this point in the game, which is something I think that will eventually change if I know my Final Fantasies. My final
is that a theme I feel like the
airships are a theme.
No, not airships. Airships I know are a theme, but like having somebody transform into a celestial sort of being, is that a thing, or is that
I don't know if that's a thing. I've only played the first game before this, and I don't really remember very much about it. I played it on the Game Boy Advance, forever ago. So I don't really remember. And I haven't, this is the next one that I've played at all. So I don't know. It'd be hard for me to say. So,
okay.
But yeah, we talked a little bit about the Mode 7 stuff pre-show. It's an interesting effect that I think they use pretty well here, which is basically, to boil it down quickly, it's like rendering your background screen and then transforming it, which is to say doing 2D math on that scene. So you render basically like a top-down Zelda, or here, whatever. You render it as if it's top down, which is to say you just fill the whole screen, but then you can take that image and do something with it in the hardware, which in this case, they basically tilt. So they clear the screen, they render to screen memory basically before they rasterize it, and then they plop that down, but they tilt it. That's what that transformation is doing. It's probably not, they wouldn't think of it as a tilt. It's not a rotation. It's actually just a projection into a different shape. And then, they basically squash it, and pull the, it's like a trapezoid. And then, and so parts of it are probably not visible on the screen, right? The closest parts, of that squash. So they sort of squash and stretch the thing, and then they draw sprites on top. So that's kind of what's going on in the Mode 7 stuff. It's the Mode 7 part is called an affine transformation, which means there's certain things you can do basically in 2D that makes a thing affine, which is basically there's a one-to-one mapping of every point to any point that it's going to go to, etc. There's some mathematical terminology there, but that's not really important. Technically, what they're just doing is take the image, squash and stretch it in some way, and then actually draw it, in that transformed position. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. It's pretty effective. It's a simple trick. It had to be a hardware trick at the time, which is to say it had to be supported by the hardware. The PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2 did things that were similar. We actually used it on, we tried some. We actually only shipped with Jedi Starfighter. The only thing we used was like not clearing the back buffer all the way. I don't know if you remember that, but when you slow time in Jedi Starfighter, we did a similar hardware-supported trick where the last N frames are basically lighter and lighter versions of themselves. Like they alpha out.
Create a blur kind of.
Yeah, they create a blur effect that was hardware supported that you could not have done rendering the whole frame, 10 times or whatever at the time. So
neat.
A lot of interesting hardware
that.
tricks. Yeah, it's a thing that's faded away from hardware for the most part, because now we have just so much horsepower that anything we want to do, we can just do. But back then it was, hey, we could put these transistors in here, and a little bit of memory for this. What do you think? And and that's the sort of experimentation that Nintendo was doing even back then. So anyway, long digression about
it's cool.
Mode 7, but
it just seems
asked a little bit about.
Yeah, it seems like the reason I brought it up and was asking kind of about its techniques and I don't know if revolutionary is a too strong of a word, but I just feel like with this game specifically, and obviously the ones that really leaned into it, like Mario Kart or something, it just seems like sort of before you have the PlayStation 1 at least, such a game changer. It just seems so cool, and I can imagine as a kid playing this game on this system that's generally a 2D sprite, pixel based, sprite kind of system, to have these moments like a Space Harrier kind of moments on your TV just seems pretty mind blowing. And I just think they very effectively use it in this game because they have that open world map that they kind of use in clever ways over and over again.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think now that I think about it, I think one of the reasons why there were such performance problems in the Castlevania, Super Castlevania 4, I guess it was, that we played, use of Mode 7, was that they had Mode 7, so they were doing basically a full screen render to do the Mode 7 thing, whatever they were doing there. They were doing something weird with the background, and then they used a ton of sprites to actually make the level, like the stuff that you actually walked on. And I think that's why they had such performance problems there, is that they basically were doing in the sprites, in the foreground stuff, way more than you normally would after having also done a full background, right? So they were basically like doubling their fill or what, like, I don't know what the cost is there. I mean, I guess it's probably just sprite time of just like load and render sprite, probably just overwhelmed. And that's why the frame rates kind of tanks there. So now that I think about it, they were pushing it. They were like, well, we can just make, why don't we put cool Mode 7 thing in it, and then we just make the level out of sprites. And it's like, oh, sweet child, I'm so sorry. But once they had decided to do it, it was probably tough to undo it.
Early performance woes.
Yep.
Performance optimization woes. Yeah.
Yeah. They probably thought like, oh, we'll find a way to make that faster. And it was like, well, no, there's just, the hardware can only do so much. You can't actually render more sprites than this. I don't know. That was a reasonable trade-off, I guess, to make, at that point. Anyway, so then we basically, we get to pick now we're at a point finally where we get to pick our party, our regular adventuring party, to go after Tara. Because now we have to go find Tara, find where she screamed off to in the West. And we're given some hints, like you should go to, what's it, Kolingen or something like that? Yeah, Kolingen or Jador. And they tell you even, like, you should go to the castle. That'll help you get there. So now the big question is, who did you pick for your party?
Well, Celis for sure. And then
have somebody magic in there.
Yeah. And it would normally, Tara's going to always be in my group if she ever comes back. And then Sabin and Edgar and Cyan. Okay.
So I was right. We had 3 in common, but not the 3 I thought. So
okay.
I thought, because you had said how down you were about Edgar.
Yeah.
In the past, I assumed that you dropped him, and added Sabin for him, but you actually swapped Sabin for Locke. I have Edgar, Locke, Celis, Cyan. Edgar,
Locke, Celis.
Yeah, I don't have Sabin
and Cyan. Right, got it.
Yeah. I mean, I like the mechanics that he has with the punching stuff and the suplex. It's great for damage and everything. Hard agree, but I just like to steal stuff. So
yeah, well, it's clearly you have an affinity toward the sort of, like you said earlier, the thieving characters and the trickster characters. I actually took those two. So Cyan will be hopefully replaced someday for Tara, because I'll have Tara back, and I'll probably keep both Tara and Celis around in the parties always. But the reason I actually took Sabin and Edgar is I wanted to see...
I thought about it for the brother stuff. Yeah.
For the brother stuff. I wanted to see what was up with that, and it actually, for me at least, it paid off. Which
did it? Okay, yeah. Tell me. Yeah. Oh, is that happened in the Opera House or something?
No, it happens at the castle because what didn't occur to me until I got there was...
In fact, Edgar says something when he's there. He's like, I wish Sabin were here for me.
Sabin hadn't been back, right, since he left.
Right.
So it was actually, they had this very elaborate kind of exposition scene and even a flashback scene where you see the matron and like the father is dying, and you basically go through the whole, like a dream, not a dream sequence, but like a memory flashback of Sabin leaving. And when you there's a moment. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So did you have a coin flip moment in the opera?
Yeah, afterwards with the gambler.
Okay, so there must have been different voice lines then for you with that, because
at the end of it, he says something like, it's a two-headed coin or whatever, however he explains it. But
he mentions it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's amazing. So that coin actually is very significant to Sabin and Edgar's relationship. But you wouldn't know that because you didn't.
I don't know that. I had no idea.
So that coin, so he goes, Salis gets that coin from Edgar, I believe. So I'm jumping ahead, but it's relevant.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because of the castle. Yeah. So anyway, you go through the whole thing. And so at the end of the sort of flashback, what you see is Edgar says, why don't we flip? So Sabin is freaking out. He's saying like,
I don't want to be king, right?
I don't want to be king. And so Edgar says, okay, let's flip for it.
He's basically doing Two-Face in the Dark Knight or whatever.
Well, if you win, then you can choose what you want to do, and if I win, then you have to stay, and we have to rule the kingdom together. He was basically saying we can't both go. Like Sabin was basically trying to say, let's just both leave. This is crazy. This is nonsense.
Right.
And so of course, because of what you know about Sabin's status, you know that he must have won. The coin flips up in the air and it goes up off the screen and they scroll up and it's flipping in the sky, and I think it never lands. So the flashback ends because you think you know what happened because Sabin leaves. So he must have won the coin toss.
Wow.
But what you don't know is that Edgar's coin that he used he basically made the decision for Sabin because he knew Sabin wanted to leave. It was a double-headed coin that Sabin was going to win, because Edgar used this coin. Basically kind of like, that's how I took it, at least. Basically, saying like, well, I'm going to help you make your decision. I'm by doing this using this tricky coin. So then when Salis takes the coin from Edgar later, and you're like, wait, that's why that, okay. But you don't know this. You don't know it's a two-headed coin until the opera scene, because it flips and then Setzer says, wait a second, this is a two-headed coin. And then you're like, what? And then Sabin actually has a voice line, I think they added in there, to Edgar, where Sabin is realizing at the moment that was a two-headed coin all those 10 years ago. As so anyway, that's a long story.
No, in mine, she just has the coin.
Yeah.
She just, and
she doesn't go over to Edgar and get it.
No, she just has it, and it's just kind of a clunker moment because it's like, well, why? That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense why they would flip for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I actually wrote a note down in the opera scene when they flipped because I was like, what is the deal with flipping coins? Like, why are there all these coin flips happening? And then when it's revealed that it's Edgar's two-headed coin, then I realized why they did it.
Yeah.
But if you didn't see that scene, then it is a clunker. But
yeah.
Anyway, long story short.
That's interesting.
Bringing both of them to the castle to get to the next continent was a big payoff for me.
Yeah, when I was in the castle, I even thought, oh man, I didn't think to bring, like, I should have brought Sabin. I didn't think about them being brothers and coming back here. I think, well, I probably did. I don't remember if you make that, like, what order you make the choice. Like, you make the choice of party, and
you
then
might be able to do it anytime.
I probably could have gone back. Like, it didn't occur to me though to do it. So,
Well, I'm interested to know if this Locke and Rachel thing, anything happens there in that town, Kipoten, whatever that town is. Did anything happen? Because you had Locke with you. There's a whole thing.
Colingen,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have Locke with me, but people kept talking about how Locke comes to, which happens right after the castle.
Oh, yes, of course. Wow. Okay,
Locke always comes to see
right.
Rachel, and I was like, "Who's Rachel? I don't know." And and
exactly. Okay, so Rachel. Yeah. Oh my God, I totally forgot about this bit. Yeah, which is a whole. It's a similar sort of thing where there's a flashback which contextualizes Locke more.
Yeah.
And this was his sweetheart, who it's kind of messed up. Like, it's a kind of crazy thing. So basically,
she the woman in the basement that with all the roses?
Yes. Yeah, she's basically in stasis, but she's effectively dead. Right?
Sleeping Beauty situation.
Yep. Yeah, so she is, but they flash back to him going into a cave, like to be an explorer, like he's this action explorer, treasure hunter, or whatever, and he's like, there'll be all. He's talking to her, and you can tell he's both excited, but also really, is into her, like that they're together. But he's also like, got stars in his eyes about what they're going to be able to do if he could just find the money in this, in this cave or whatever. He goes out onto this bridge, and there's like an earthquake basically, and the bridge starts to collapse, or maybe something's going to come down from the ceiling, and she pushes him off the bridge, and she sacrifices herself for him. She doesn't die, but she loses her memory. And so he goes back to her house, and they won't, the parents are upset because she's lost her memory. And
it's the coma. It's the kind of the coma archetype story of
right, exactly, where you wake up, you don't remember something, but she doesn't remember him at all, so she doesn't want him around either. But then when he goes off to war, I don't remember exactly how,
because there's some old guy down there with her.
That's her dad,
father?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's her dad. Yeah. And then, but I think like he goes off to war, and basically she ends up taking a bullet for him there. Like when the Empire takes over this town, he tries to fight back. She ends up getting hurt, killed. But in the moment that she's killed, she remembers him. And it's very contrived. Yeah, it's a lot of tropes all rolled up into one, including fridging. Yeah,
including fridging.
Yeah. There's a lot going on there. But that's kind of motivates his hatred for the Empire as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's all that stuff going on. I can't remember the exact mechanics of how her memory comes back, or like exactly how that happens, but it happens in the last moment, effectively, of her life. Because we know she remembers her love.
Sakaguchi is I think we know he's a Shakespeare. Fan, right? So like that's a clearly. Romeo and Juliet moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And actually Locke mentions to Salis maybe in the opera scene where she says something like, "Why are you helping me? Why did you save me?" And he says something about I
because I couldn't save somebody else.
Because I couldn't save somebody else, and I didn't know who he was talking about.
Right, and
I thought maybe he was talking about Tara, but that doesn't make sense. So he's talking about Rachel, which I haven't seen. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so
Holy
we both.
Cow.
Yeah. Somebody actually emailed this week. I think I'm going to be the one reading that. Is like, hey, you guys should really talk about what happens when you have different party members. So
Well,
so I'm glad we did. Yeah,
we should talk about the opera scene though now.
We should.
We got to talk about Zozo quickly too, maybe.
Yeah, let's talk about it quickly. We don't have to read all the emails, but I do think we need to at least talk about Zozo, which I actually call 2020. Because the Z's could be read as twos.
That town was a lot like the year 2020. So.
Exactly, it's a rough town. It was another time that I actually died. I did a ton of stuff in there and then died. I had nowhere near enough like potions, just not even close. I was just running out of everything, and there were some tricks about different encounters. The Gigas in particular, there's a trick with them that I didn't pick out, which is that if you use any non-fight ability, it does its magnitude 8 like earthquake thing, which does a ton of damage. So if like somebody casts a spell or uses tools or whatever, it'll do magnitude 8 even while it dies. Like even if you do enough damage, or if Cyan uses his Swordmaster techniques or whatever. But if you only use fights, it doesn't happen. But I was getting crushed by them because it's like 250 points of damage or whatever. Maybe you were just like fight through those.
No, I don't think so, because I had a routine that I was going through. One thing I did do with those guys, though, is I would imp them immediately.
Oh, well, that would do it too.
I don't know.
Because they probably can't do the... Did they do the magnitude 8 at that point?
I don't even know what you're talking about, really.
Oh, so they do... There's a thing that they do...
an earthquake thing, huh?
Yeah, it's an earthquake that they do even when they die. And it just does, like I said, it's like a potion each worth of damage. Over 200 points of damage per character. All 4 take it, even in its dying breath.
I might have just not noticed and then burned.
Yeah, and then
healed
and done something else. Or you might have, if you're doing imp, maybe it doesn't do it. Maybe it doesn't. So that might be another way to avoid it. Yeah, because I think it's because of its size, right? Is that it's doing this earthquake attack?
Oh, right, yeah. Because
if you imp it, it probably doesn't do that. Yeah,
I didn't think it was going to let me imp it because it felt like something that would be maybe a little bit of a cheating thing, but it did. I mean, I just it was a really big sprite, or awesome looking sprite, but then I just imped it and I felt satisfaction over the fact that I turned this sprite into a little guy.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so
that's good. And that's probably why you found a different way around that same problem. But I didn't notice. I was like, wow, these are really tough. And they're just another random thing you can run into. Yeah. I was just getting worked, whenever I'd fight one of those, because I would steal from it and I would,
That's neat that they make you mix it up.
It took me a while to pick up what was going on there. That's actually one of the things I love about JRPGs. You and I have talked about this before, but I love the figuring out the language of the game and how to subvert what the game is doing. Like you found a different way. You maybe stumbled into it, but you did find a different way through that same problem of I have this thing that is going to do a massive amount of damage, and I can't be taking that all the time. What I did was just did some grinding. I went back out and just did grinding, got a bunch of money, and then bought a ton of potions, so I had them. And then my second time through, I discovered that this was happening. I was like, oh.
I would have never found... I don't think I would have ever put 2 and 2 together on that.
Well, it will do it every round, I think, as well. Every turn it gets up if you've used the thing, a non-fight on it since. So it's that's when I started picking up. Oh, that's I see what's happening here, and I try. And
it might have been the imp thing then. Yeah, I might have just lucked out on that.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it's a size. I'm sure the implication is because it's big, it can do an earthquake. So because gigas is another word they use often for really big, earth-shaking creatures. That goes back at least to this far and probably before this.
So did you? Yeah. Anyway, I thought that section was neat just because it was different. Going through a town with merchants and thieves and stuff, and then having random encounters, jumping from building to building was cool, and kind of navigating how you go up the stairs and stuff was kind of neat.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it took me a while to figure out about the windows,
Jumping
I guess I didn't. Yeah, I didn't talk to somebody who said or maybe I did and listened to them. I don't know. That should have been my clue. The other thing that's going on in 2020 there, or Zozo, is that there's a clock-based puzzle.
Yeah, what was that all about? I didn't do that.
Yeah, so if you talk to any of the characters, they lie to you. So for example, there's a guy who will tell you don't jump from window to window. You're supposed to ignore that and jump from window to window. And that should have actually been my clue. But if you talk to them, some of them will talk about clocks.
Yeah.
Tell you what time it is.
Right. I talked to them about it, but I didn't really. Yeah.
All of them are lying. So it's like a reverse logic puzzle of like, it's an elimination puzzle of like, oh, I wrote them all down. I started writing them down because like at first I just wrote, oh, okay, the hour is, or not the hour, but like the seconds are such and such. So I'd already written that down, and then somebody else said, oh no, it's the seconds are divisible by 20 or something like that. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. The other guy said 30. And so I was like, well, maybe I got that wrong. So the second time through, I kind of went around more, and like made sure I talked to everybody. I discovered with that long chain of like dudes who are climbing up and talking to a guy and going up the stairs, there's like this section where there's like just this parade of dudes that you're inserted into. Each one of those guys says something different.
Oh.
Which I didn't think was true. But they all tell you what time it is, what hour it is. And they say one says it's 2, one says it's 12, 10, 8, 4. So it's actually 6 o'clock because they're all lying to you. It's 6 something, okay. So et cetera. Like, so as you talk to all these people, and you might want to, well, I don't know if you can go back, but if at some point you may want to go back, because the reward for all of that, I didn't think you'd have Edgar in your party. The reward for all that is to get a new tool for Edgar.
Oh.
And the tool that Edgar gets is the chainsaw.
What? Oh my God.
And here's the chainsaw. It does, quite a lot. It's a single enemy thing, right? But the trade-off is that there's a low percentage chance that he will pull on a hockey mask and kill the person he's doing damage to. Because he's Jason now, because he's got the chainsaw.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And that's the thing with them. There's a Friday the 13th thing that runs through some of these games as well. It's another joke. Yeah, it's a whole thing with Japanese SNES games too, generally, but Square games, like, I don't know. I could probably look it up. There's probably a bunch of them.
That's so random.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pop culture stuff.
Yeah, but that one,
I know I've seen it in some other game.
Yeah. How funny.
Yeah. So,
one of the reasons I like Locke's autocrossbow is that it hits multiple things, though. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess if it's that powerful, it might be fun to get. But I mean, I guess that fits the theme of Zozo, because it's kind of like a dark, horror-y kind of place. So that's funny. That's funny. Huh.
Yeah, they sometimes drop things specifically on Friday the 13th as well. I'm reading. I'm just kind of looking to see if I can find. I know I've seen other things in, and there was maybe a Friday the 13th game on the SNES, which is another thing I'm thinking about. Actually, now that I think about it, there was a Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I think there was
game. Yeah. Probably not one we'll play, even though I know it was well reviewed at the time. It's might be hard to find, I would think, at this point. So. Anyway,
weird.
So it's funny.
Funny location.
It was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I was streaming that. Somebody had to point out that happened because I was looking at chat, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. But thanks, Bio. Bio was helping me with a lot of stuff. And then I guess let's talk about the Opera House, and then we'll go to feedback. So I just want to say this is amazing. The Opera House.
Yeah,
I thought it was amazing. Fantastic. I bet you had similar response, but let me hear it. Maybe I hate opera. I don't
know. No, of course. Yeah. I mean, it was an unexpected, I guess we had heard, I feel like during Final Fantasy IX, and we were doing, and I mentioned this on my stream last night, because actually when I was playing Death Stranding last night, a few of the guys came on and were like, so what do you think of the opera? Because they knew that I was playing it, or that we had potentially just recorded.
I mentioned on my stream that you had just finished while I was on my stream.
Okay,
so anybody who was in there would have known that we had skipped recording because you were finishing.
Yeah, that's right. That's why then. Yeah. So
I said something like, Tim's playing the Opera House right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and so, I kind of knew of it. It's a bit of an infamous sort of thing. But not being a JRPG player, I never really experienced it. And we did do the play within the play that in Final Fantasy IX, and so I think it came up there. But I mean, it went beyond my expectations as far as how much they did with it. It's another one of those flabbergasting moments for me where I'm just like, who does this? Like, it's incredible, amazingly implemented, I think, on this system. I did have one beef with the ending of it because I failed a couple times because I didn't understand what to do with the flowers. But other than that, like,
I'm on the classic, so I just rewound.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's definitely an advantage of playing in the classic.
Yeah.
So,
well, you've been playing on the DS or whatever some of these games in the past.
Oh no, I'm not calling you out for it. No, I wish I was
Yeah.
playing to rewind. I'm fine rewinding. Thank you for modern remakes of these.
Kidding.
But it gives you three choices or whatever. So, or three tries. So I didn't have to do the whole thing over, but you do have to redo the whole opera. So anyway, but I mean, I don't know. It's just like the fact that they made the opera house, they have the conductor, they have the audience. I don't know if you did anything with the switches, but like there's the one switch where you fall through the floor and then land on the stage and then bounce across the heads of the audience to get back.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, I didn't do that because I only fiddled with the levers once I had once I was doing the timer section. So
I did fail the timer.
Tell you okay.
I failed the timer once. Yeah, because of that, because I had fallen through the floor and all this stuff happened.
So you didn't do the rightmost one like it said to do.
I did, but then I went on to do the rest of them after. I
was like, okay. I was like, how did you even get to those? Because he blocked, I think, you before that.
Yeah, that's funny. I hit the right one and then I hit the rest of them, and then one of them's a trap door, and
and takes a bunch of time. That's hilarious too. Oh my god.
Yeah, so it was fun.
That's really funny. Yeah,
and the backstory of sort of like Maria and the maestro, and I don't know.
Also, just how much time they devote to it. Like,
it's very very elaborate.
They have the guy come out. And then he vocalizes, through the limited but still for its time quite robust synthesizer in the SNES.
Yeah, the singing is incredible.
But they take the time to do these songs out as a melody and a slow-paced melody. Like, they're not whipping through this by any means. Like that, I think that was the thing of a lot of surprising things here. Like how much they put to it. Like, you pointed out all the elements that I agreed with. Like, they have parallax between the balcony and the audience. They have this very detailed, obviously repeating audience, but still amazing. Mm-hmm. And then he walks out on the stage to sing his song. This is to 12-year-olds who, if they've ever heard opera, probably don't have a strong positive opinion of opera, I'm guessing. I'm not personally an opera fan. Even as a fairly cultured adult, I'm such a story person, and I don't find that opera works for me because the stories are more broad, right? Like I love theater, but I don't love opera because it's not like I would prefer musical theater. This probably sounds heretical to some listeners, but like musical theater is just as complex as far as stories go often, we're nearly as theater, but opera is not, because opera has to be about the really big emotions, and so like the story parts actually are thinner. Anyway, point is, kids probably don't love opera, and they sit with it. Like they don't rush through it, they don't brush it aside quickly. They almost give like a sense of like, no, this is what it's like. You go and you sit, and there's like these big arias, right? Or big duets in this case, or one of each, I guess. And it's just quietly amazing. Like I can see why this is justly famous. You said infamous, but I would say famous.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah.
Well, you mean infamous like the Three Amigos mean infamous. Sure. It's infamous,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a surprising thing, to your point about like kids seeing this, like whether they're exposed to opera or not. It's just like, and the music is quite good. Actually, while you're talking to, I forgot to test the theory, but which is probably not even worthy of calling it a theory, because it's going to be obviously a yes. But there are YouTube videos of real people singing these
yes
arias. You know?
Yeah, I have a Spotify link that'll be in the show notes for people who want to listen to one of those tracks. But yeah, there's also there's one that was on in a Final Fantasy concert. So somebody put that in the chat, and I'm sorry I did not jot down your name, but I do appreciate it. I should have at the time. I copied the link, and then I didn't go back to copy the name, so my mistake. But thank you for that.
It's just so different, you know, than anything out there, you know, and then what's more is like, I feel like the sort of like irony of it is that for the most part, all it is an elaborate character introduction to Setzer and his, you know what I mean? Like, cause you know why they're setting it up, you know, why Salus is practicing and the whole ruse, right. And Locke's whole plan. And then the freaking squid guy comes in at the end, who I totally forgot. I wrote down like, who's this guy? And I forgot he was in the river section. And
the trench, the serpent trench, right? Yeah.
Oh
no, the river. You're right. The river.
I remember.
Yeah, exactly. It was the river. It was the raging rapids. Yeah.
And then it's just such a funny and different and unexpected thing in the middle of this. Yeah. So I mean, I think like when it comes to this series, and we talked about this with Final Fantasy IX, I think multiple times as well. It's like this isn't something, even though it's the same people, a lot of the same people. This, for instance, you wouldn't find something like this necessarily in, say, Chrono Trigger or something. They did other cool things, but I just feel like this for me as a newbie Final Fantasy, you know, player. This is now sort of like these sorts of scenes and moments that are this sort of lovingly crafted seems to be just like part of the franchise, you know, or something, you know. It's just like they're not afraid. I don't know if it's Sakaguchi or what it is exactly, but they're not afraid to put some of their own passion behind some of this stuff, and spend this many resources on not even thinking about their audience. You know, it's like there's nobody at Square at the time said that kids playing on the SNES want to actually, there's no marketing data that said they want an opera scene, you know,
right.
They just did it, you know, because they wanted to. And I think it was infused. It became that sort of spirit became infused, I think, in the series, as far as them doing maybe unorthodox things. I mean, they did it, at least they did in Final Fantasy. I know it was the same producer, but
I will say that, I mean, I think it is really that. And probably, I mean, Sakaguchi was in his 30s already, I believe, when this came out. Right. So, cause he's like half a generation older than we are. He's between my age and my father's age. You know, he's older than we are by at least a decade. You know, so he was older, right? And I suspect some of his collaborators were as well. I would have to go through the list, but I'm sure some of them were. You know, I think that that's something kind of great, you know, about being in something. Like, one of the things that was pretty common when we were coming up was just so much depending on the same pop culture stuff. It was frequently, you know, I think people still say it to some degree. It was like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had games that weren't just, you know, Star Wars, Aliens, and, you know, maybe more recently The Matrix, etc. And, you know, those were like this handful of pop cultural references that we constantly draw on, you know. And here's somebody who's into Shakespeare, which you'd say, well, that's pretty, you know, well known. It's like, yeah, but not a lot of game developers directly draw on it, you know. You know, I think something like BioShock, one of the reasons why that was such a culture, like a critical splash, was like, oh, actually they're drawing from other things, Art Deco and, you know, objectivism, as things that they're drawing thematic material from, Ayn Rand specifically, I guess. I say objectivism like people will know what that is, but like the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, all that jazz, all that happy ruins a lot of, you know, teenage boys, you know, reading. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's actually also part of the staying power of some of these Final Fantasy games, is that they do things that are this unexpected.
Well, and it clearly
because it comes from real love of the material they draw from.
Well, and I think it's a great example of when creators go out on a limb sort of and stick to their sort of creative guns or inspirational guns of something that they definitely want to do, rather than, what is like, I was being snarky with my marketing comment, but, rather than sticking with what the market seems to want. This scene is clearly made an impression on a lot of our audience, on a lot of our listeners, because they're asking about it. They remember it, right? So regardless of it not being an action scene, they all remember it clearly, and they're all like, "What did you think?" Or what, and so it's just proof, right, that it can make an impression even on a younger generation, despite it having nothing to do with what you would think they would like. And so
it's
that
also
stuff still can resonate and succeed.
It's also super layered, because at the same time you also have a kind of comic farce going on over the top of it, which is we've substituted in this general from the Empire to sing the main part. She's learning the lines right before she goes on stage. She could flub them, right? She's got to go do the motions. You can, you did fail them. And then you even had slapstick comedy as well. Like, so there's all these other layers of stuff, plus the squid-like thing, trying to be a foil, right? You have all these other elements as well layered on top of it that, I mean, it's just beautiful. Like, it just has so much going on, as well as really kind of using facilities of the hardware that you wouldn't expect, like matching basically something that sounds vaguely voice-like. It's not, obviously it's not a voice, but it has a haunting quality of an Italian or German opera. It's amazing.
It's effective. Yeah, there is I'd probably mention it maybe during Final Fantasy IX, but there's a to call out a modern example of this that I thought was well done. There is a play in The Witcher 3 that Geralt is in. I think it's probably optional. I don't think you have to do it, but it's a pretty good side quest, and there's a script you have to memorize. So it's similar to this, where you have to select the right one in the right order, and they did a great job with it, because it's full Shakespeare feeling, kind of like one-off kind of thing. So it's done in modern times too, and I think it was actually pretty well received as well. So, but yeah, pretty cool.
Yep. Pretty cool. And I'm looking through my notes. I'm realizing we skipped entirely over the fact that Rama shows up where you find Terra. That's how you get the Espers, but we'll leave that to next time, because
I think we should hit the Espers as a whole nother topic.
Yeah, I mean, we're going now. Yeah, the next thing we're doing is going to the Magitech research facility to rescue or free the Espers that are. I won't say rescue, because I think they're gonna get incorporated into us, but at least free the Espers that are at that facility. So it'll be a good time to kind of talk about both how those were introduced and the mechanical stuff that are associated with the Espers. So we'll do that next time. But now that we're almost an hour and 15 minutes in, it is, of course, time to turn to feedback. So we will probably not get through all the things that we were going to try to get through, but let's give it a go. The first thing that we have is a review. We love each and every review. Thank you so much. You have one here that harkens back a ways, but I thought it was particularly funny because you're also playing Death Stranding right now. So go ahead and read that review, and then we'll get to the email.
Okay. An enjoyable and insightful podcast about video game development from ArmsTech president Kenneth Baker. Okay.
It's a callback. Here it comes.
Okay. Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I'll keep going. I was first turned on to this podcast by my brother when he sent me a link and timestamp where he wrote into the two hosts and shared an anecdote about how my name appears in PlayStation 1 game called Metal Gear Solid, a game that spent several episodes They spent several episodes playing and discussing relevance and impact to game development today. I thought it was funny. I thought it was a funny one-time thing. However, I started listening and found that hosts Tim and Brett have very interesting and insightful discussions around game development, regardless of whether or not you've played the game they're talking about. They will occasionally have very engaging interviews with other video game developers or people in the industry that give off the sense of very genuine and thoughtful conversation from both sides. I highly recommend this podcast if you appreciate the fact that a lot of work and dedication goes into video game development, and the two hosts' combined experience, along with their funny commentary and general friendship, make for a very enjoyable podcast that I look forward to every week. I would also like to point out the detailed show notes. Okay, here we go. Included with each episode. It must take a fair amount of effort to keep up with that each week.
I'm so happy for Kenneth Baker.
Finally, somebody mentions it after 5 years.
I could not have written that sentence better.
Yeah. Headphones are also recommended, as host Tim is often a light talker. However, no complaints as they
it's
produce,
much better now. Yeah.
As they produce excellent podcast free of charge. So.
Yeah, we use a auto leveler and stuff like that now. Back then, I was doing it all by hand. I'm sure it was not always. I mean, obviously, I should be a little.
Oh, I am a light talker though, so that's just me. But no, thank you, Kenneth Baker.
So my first thing I want to say is I'm a little disappointed that you didn't simply remember your Metal Gear things. That was another callback.
Yes. Right.
To remember ArmsTech president Kenneth Baker. But he actually, his brother did write in and talked about, you remember that. Yeah. So I thought that was hilarious. But that was a great review, and I really appreciate it. It was really, really kind to get that.
It was amazing.
It was really, really nice. So
we got him. He thought it was a one-time thing, but he's still listening.
Yeah, he doesn't even play them all that much. He was like, "There's a my name's in a game," and now he listens to our podcast. Thanks so much, Kenneth Baker, and I hope you have a good career at ArmsTech. I have one here from Eric Anderson. The subject is keep Edgar in your party. So we've got our wish there. I was just listening to the first episode of your Final Fantasy VI playthrough, and Tim just said he was going to take Edgar out of his party. Don't! Admittedly, he's annoying and problematic, but he's so overpowered with his quote-unquote tools that he's worth keeping in, especially for grinding. Not to mention some of the later tools are hilarious. And at one point in the game, keeping him in your party and his brother Sabin allows for some good cutscenes. Keep up the great pod, guys. Best, Eric Anderson.
Didn't we have somebody last week also, or last session also tell us to keep?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone says
it's been a lot. There's been a lot of that. He also has a PS. I mentioned Edgar is problematic. When you finish the game, you should read this. And there's a link. When we get to the point, I actually knew about this from a separate, another podcast I listened to. But there is another particularly problematic spot that's going to come up later. And I think it's just a few lines, but I will put in that link at that time. I'll try to remember to do that in any case.
Well, I have some notes on them, but we haven't been pointing them out, but they're trickled throughout, to be honest.
There's a lot of them. Some are worse than others. I guess I want to say.
Yeah.
Salus
is
there's some tropey problems with Locke. Yeah, Celis's intro was not. There's some issues there.
She's captured and
yeah, for sure. All right, why don't you hit that next email? These, of course, are being sent to devgameclub@gmail.com.
Okay, so Final Fantasy VI, from Logan. Okay, Logan. Hi, Brett and Tim. I was totally delighted to hear that you're starting Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy is a series I can go on and on about, and 6 in particular is a game I've played numerous times and feel a personal connection with. I'll likely write in again after your playthrough, but without spoiling anything, I want to share a few things that might increase your appreciation of the game. And he has a bullet list here. The first one is, once you have the option to choose your own party, I'd encourage you to occasionally talk about the cutscenes each of you get, as they can change change depending on your party configuration. While the overall story remains the same, there are some scenes that completely reshape your understanding of the characters, and I believe getting the full background on some can take multiple playthroughs. Oh, wow. Okay. So
check.
We've begun doing that. Yeah. Very drastic, cool things happening with that. The second one, because there's so much optional and conditional content, prior to the internet, there were a number of rumors about this game. A lot of it wasn't true, but there's some truly mind-blowing stuff that's easy to miss and which I didn't realize until I was an adult and the internet was a thing. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, but I'm not going to be one to look that stuff up though. So I will have to remain a child, of
I suspect we'll be leaning on the audience for some of that stuff. I mean,
maybe we find some of them or something, but I don't know how hidden they are, but yeah. Anyway.
I think there's a point, as we alluded to earlier, like there will be a point where this game opens up. We might even get to it next time. I'm not sure. But I think that's the point at which I tend to go crazy scouring just everywhere. I don't know if I'll have the time this time. I don't know if you'll have the time this time. But we did that with Chrono Trigger, and we both found quite a lot of stuff. And some stuff that didn't, like we each found some stuff that the other didn't, I think as well. So so that should be interesting.
It's good. It's good. It's good that he at least mentions it so we can look out for it. I have some theories of places I'd like to go back to see what happens. But anyway, next he goes on. There are numerous allusions to Star Wars throughout the game, starting with the Wedge and Biggs in the beginning. I'm not sure if this was the start of Final Fantasy obsession with Star Wars, but it's when it became very obvious. If Brett has ever played 12, he knows what I'm talking about. Do you know what
Yo, I sure do. There's this character named Han Solo. No.
Well, Setzer is right. I mean, Setzer's a gambler, notorious gambler. He has the fastest ship. Or the only
fast ship. Yeah, he's got the only ship. Yeah. Which is really funny in some of the translation. Like, see people say, "Well, you're gonna need an airship," and it's like, "Well, why don't you get the only ship?" It's really funny. Well, not only is the character Balthier very much a rogue, lovable rogue, slightly older figure to the sort of main character. He also has a companion who is a non-human, slightly taller than him character. Now there are some differences. It's not a straight Chewbacca ripoff, but she's a Viera. She's a bunny person, tall and lithe. There's some definite parallels there in character design. So.
Next, check any grandfather clocks you come across, as there's always an elixir hidden inside, and these items can be a godsend when you're in a tough spot. To this day, I always check clocks in JRPGs just in case. And I've found that as well. I'm doing that for sure. Similar to Chrono Trigger, I would give yourselves extra time near the very end of the game to explore all the side contents, as this is often some of the best stuff. And then finally, you're already starting to touch on it, but there's one aspect of the story structure that breaks convention and is a perpetual debate among Final Fantasy fans. I have a personal theory about it, but I'll save that for a future email. We've already started talking about it. I'll finish up. Also, in case you weren't aware, your colleague Kirk Hamilton is playing through Final Fantasy VI for the first time as well over on Triple Click Podcast. Oh, I know Jason Schreier describes himself as a super fan of this game, so it might be good cross-promotion. Best of luck on the grind, Logan. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we know Schreier's a big fan. So.
Schreier's a big fan, and Kirk and Maddy are actually both playing it, I think, for the first time. And it's been interesting because I have listened to some of those casts. I'm not super spoiler averse, and this game I knew a lot about coming in, and that's why some of the things I know are coming. So,
what do you think the convention is that he's talking about? That.
I think it might be the linearity and the lack of choice in party members for such a long time and things like that would be my guess.
Maybe.
Yeah, and then the splits, but the splits are chosen for you for most of the, up to the point of this session. So
like this section,
that would be my
they
guess.
force Locke and Salus on you because of the opera, right? For that section,
right?
So you have to have them. Yeah,
I have to have them.
Cool.
Yeah, and I didn't actually. I already had them, so I didn't. That wasn't.
Wasn't
that
meaningful.
didn't happen to me, right? It just. I just went straight in. Again, it was kind of smooth for me there. So yeah, it's those would be
forward
my guesses
to Logan's future mail. Yeah, I
do too. Yeah, for sure. Let me see. Do we have time for one more? Yes. Let's grab one quick one more. Is it short? Not terribly. Anyway, JRPGs and abstraction from Steven. Hi, Brett and Tim. I've been listening to this show for a while now, and the day has finally dawned for me to write in. I, like Tim, have never connected with JRPGs, and it always felt like I was missing something. Unlike Tim, however, I was foolish enough to keep trying over and over again with the same results. I've played almost every main Final Fantasy game, but rarely for more than a couple of hours each. When Tim mentioned the disconnect between 2D and 3D, it immediately reminded me of Dragon Quest XI. It allows you to switch between fully realized 3D and 2D versions of the game at will, a hugely impressive feature and a real testament to how important tradition and legacy is to the series, and the JRPG genre at large. Raph Koster has this notion that breaking down a game into its most elemental systems can prove that an entire genre is really just one game with different skins or variations, and I find that very applicable in this case. Final Fantasy in particular has its roots in D&D and visual novels, and honestly, I think the two have been clumsily supporting each other ever since. For me, the heavily abstracted systems and frequent simplified battles usually amount to a grind that feels like filler between plot points. Or in other words, it feels like a bunch of artists trying to design mechanics. And he has a smiley face. That said, I find the world and character design of Final Fantasy VI to be extraordinary, and the music is truly genius, so you guys are in for a treat. As you play more, I'm excited to hear how you respond to the combat system and whether or not you find the mechanics and story to be well integrated. Thanks so much for the show, Steven. Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about the music yet, other than kind of the opera house stuff. But I'm sure we will. This does have some delightful music in it.
Yeah, we need to make sure we definitely need to make sure we talk about it in the future. I mean, even some of just the location underscore music, for just like Zozo or something like that,
right?
Is just really good. I mean, we what's the composer's name? I'm blanking on, but
Uematsu.
Yeah, Uematsu, and I mean, it's just this is masterclass stuff here, and also you know why it's sunk into people's heads. Yeah, but so yeah. I mean,
okay.
Interesting to hear another struggle with the genre, for sure. So I didn't expect it to be something I would like. But then I didn't play it until 1999 or whatever, 2000. No, later. 2000. It was 2000 when the PS2 came out. Rather, I played Final Fantasy 9, and I was like, oh, this is what people like. So I kind of got it right away. I don't know. I still, play. So I guess 9 and now this is really the only of this structure that I've played so far. But I'm just not sure I'm ever going to like the random encounters. That's kind of my only main beef. Everything else I'm fine with, but something about that system is it's just always going to disrupt.
You could play 12.
My play style.
12's battles are not random. They're visible. You can you can avoid them. You can run away from them.
Yeah. Well, Chrono Trigger didn't as well. And there's Ni no Kuni, I think, has kind of had that same thing where.
Yeah. Ni no Kuni and 12 are very similar in that respect. You can sort of.
Yeah. No, I know there's others out there that do it. Yeah. It was more of just, for the early Final Fantasy games. But anyway. Yeah. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, no, and it's something that we should probably talk about at some point. But we have to go because you've got to go.
Yep.
Thank you for those reviews. The email, of course, for that review and those emails, we love getting both of those. And, of course, email can go to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
You are going to be imminently streaming more Death Stranding at your twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. You said you're halfway across America?
I think Die Hard Man last night, yes, his name's Die Hard Man. Die Hard Man last night told me that I was halfway across the U.S. Yep. So I've crossed maybe the Rockies, or I'm at the Rockies. There's actually, now that I think about it, the map that I'm on now, there are some mountains to what I could consider to be the West. So, I'm
all right,
making progress.
So it's more
strands across America.
Yeah, more even than halfway if you're already to the Rockies. And of course, I've been streaming as well at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. I am currently playing Dragon Quest Builders because I don't have enough JRPGs in my life.
Did you finish the other one? Or
I did. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. I really loved it.
Oh, the final,
the last story. The last story. Yeah, not the Final Fantasy. The last story.
Okay. All right. Well, we should hear more about that later. I'm interested to know. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I should like download a video and take some clips out for you because the combat's so interesting. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun being a blackjack playing, world traveling, casino dwelling free spirit this week, and good night.
Good night.